A very warm welcome to all of you today. This is Deepak Bhatt, and I'm going to be a presenter today. And I would be speaking on a topic related to Agile and Scale Agile. And I'll be giving you guys an overview and a very high level picture of how things are working in the industry related to Agile and Scale Agile. How and why Agile is being adopted industry, the success of the Agile and few of the disadvantages of agile, which is leading to the industry to move to scale agile. And then we'll talk about scale agile, the different frameworks of scale agile, and how we can adopt scale agile into the current process and current working in our organization. So welcome, let me welcome you all again, and let's start this journey. Thank you, Deep. So that was my virtual representation on the net, the virtual guy. Um, so moving on, guys. Welcome all again to this presentation. And a industry survey was done 15 to 20 years back, and it was floated to prominent IT organizations, asking them to fill up the survey and to um, to talk about the challenges that they would require the new methodology if introduced into the industry to address. If a new methodology is introduced, what would they like that methodology to address? And the top three reasons that came out of from that survey was ability to manage changing priorities, which is a very true statement today, gentlemen. Um, Things are changing rapidly on a daily basis, and the industries are struggling to keep up with those change. So that was the number one reason they would uh, want to have a methodology which would help them address that. How to increase productivity? How do we put more stuff into market? How do we put things quickly into market? So that was another reason that they wanted a new methodology to be introduced and address that. And third was having improved project visibility. Um, in the waterfall project, what was happening was initially the client was getting involved and they were signing the papers SOW, and then they disappeared for 8 to 9 months completely, and then came back in after 10 months in the form of a UAT where they tested the functionality, where they tested the product, and 80 to 90% of time they had a nasty surprise. This is not what they were expecting. So how do we go about addressing that challenge? And this is something that they wanted the new methodology to address too. Other than these top three reasons, there were other reasons that the industry wanted the new methodology to address, and these are few of those reasons. And I can give you a guarantee that any project that is doing a agile transformation or moving from waterfall to agile is doing so because of one of the reasons that you see on the screen right now. And that is where agile has gained prominence in last 10 years, and industry has actually recognized this is the methodology or this is the way to go to address the current challenges that they have in their organization. And thus we see large organizations like Salesforce, SAP, cloud computing, all of them moving towards agile methodology. So what is agile, and what is it all about, and why is it something that the industry craves for? So before we even I get into the technical definition of agile, one has to understand agile is basically a cultural change. It's all about change in mindset. And in the upcoming slides, we'll see how it talks about the point of change in mindset. Um, if you are ready to change, then you are in a good position to adopt agile into the industry. What is happening today is everybody wants to adopt agile in their own manner, and that is where they fail, and ultimately they blame agile. So it is more about changing yourself first, more about changing your thought process, and then adopting the agile process into your industry. So it's about change in mindset. It's a cultural change. So the technical definition that we give to agile is we'll go for an iterative and incremental approach and work in small batches. It is as simple as that. Iterative and incremental approach. This is a point that we'll see in the upcoming slide. So as I said, it's all about change. Before we even get into the technicality of agile, we have to ensure the people who are working with us, they are ready to change. Our project managers, they should be willing to change. Our high level management, they should be willing to change. Our people who are working, the developers who are working, the testers who are working, um, or the team leads who are working, everybody is ready to accept a change and their position in a position to understand the change. So the change that we are talking about, what's the change that we are talking about? So before agile came into the being, this is the world that we lived in. So we had BA, we had the QA, we had the dev world, we had the architect world, and all of us were working in silos. Each of the silos refused to talk to each other, and particularly when it came to the blame time, um, the finger pointing used to be always on other silos. Nobody was willing to accept the blame. Everybody wanted to live in their own world. Everybody wanted to do their own work and just move on. And that is the primary reason that the waterfall projects were failing. So in comes Agile. What does Agile do? It comes up with a concept of self-organizing team. So this self-organizing team. What is a self-organizing team? Agile says, you know what? We'll take one person from each of these silos and form a team. And that itself is a big change in mindset. Before this, nobody had thought about it in this way, or nobody had thought about it in this manner that we could have a team consisting of people from different skill set, different backgrounds, and still do our work and still achieve our output. So this is the first step from change in mindset. A, this can be done. Secondly, when you have people coming from different backgrounds, you have to understand we are a team. We are going to work together and achieve an output and achieve the product, achieve the functionality, deliver it. So when we think from that perspective, that is where again the change in mindset comes. A lot of the projects today in Agile are still struggling with this idea of change in mindset. Hey, I am a developer. Why should I talk to an architect? I am a BA. Why should I talk to a tester? So what we see today also is in many projects silos within a agile team. So it's, as I said, it is not about the technical definition that is important. It is more about change in mindset. You know, God, I am a BA. I am from developer background. I am from architect background. I am uh, from a QA background. But we together are a team, and we together will deliver the functionality, the product, or the work that is expected from us. So this is what a self-organizing team does. If an issue or concern comes within the team, it doesn't get escalated to the next level. It usually gets resolved within the team. Now, when I say an issue or concern gets resolved within the team, it can only be possible when we have people from different backgrounds forming a team and resolving the issue. If we have a team of only developers and an issue comes that is related to architect, the developers are not in a position to fix it. So if we have somebody from a architect background sitting in the team, there is a person who can address that. So all the issues get resolved within the team, and talked about within the team. So this is again a change in mindset, uh, the culture of change in mindset. So that is where agile completely moved away from the typical thing that was happening, and he said, hey, you know what, we are going to propose a new culture into the working of an organization. We are going to have a self-organizing team. Secondly, that agile talk about was having a cross-functional team. We as an expert on any technology are SMEs of that particular technology. And in our IT industry, we are called as the I model. I am an SME of my own skill set, my own subject. But what Agile says is, hey, let's follow a T model. Let's be specialist of our own technology and SME of our own technology, but let's learn something new, something more. It is not necessary for one to become an SME, but it is good to have knowledge of few other things. And in that way, you become truly a cross-functional team. If I am a QA tester, it's not that I should limit my knowledge only to functional testing. I can still look into automation testing, learn something about automation. If I have some more keen sense, I can ask the developers, hey, how do you do coding? Can you teach me? And develop my skill set in that way. And today's IT industry asks or is only interested in those people who are T-shaped, who have a T-shaped knowledge. Hey, you know what? You are specialist, but you know few things too, few other things too. And these people get widely accepted in our industry. So Agile actually preaches on having a cross-functional team and a self-organizing team. And this is a team that stands on its own. Now, when I talk about cross-functional is where again the change in mindset comes. People today say, hey, you know what? Why? Why? I am a Java expert. Why do I need to learn any other technology? Why should I do that? Why should I do this? That is where things go wrong. And you are not truly a cross-functional team member even if you are working in an agile team. So this is again that leads back to the point change in mindset. Hence, agile can be truly adopted in our industry if people are willing to change. Otherwise, it is again going to be another waterfall methodology, and we are seeing a lot of that in our industry. So, what we have to do is when when I take my sessions and when I teach my students or participants who come in the class, I give them the true picture as to how agile should be. So uh, tomorrow, if it is a case where they are in position to be true change agents, they should have the correct knowledge about of going about it. So that they should actually know what agile preaches, what is all agile all about. So these are the two things agile emphasizes. Now coming to the agile umbrella, um, agile is a methodology. A lot of people say agile is a framework. No, no, it's not a framework. It's a methodology. It is something that is replacing the waterfall methodology right now in the current industry. And under Agile, there are other frameworks that the industry adopts. And hence we call Agile as an umbrella under which we have a lot of frameworks. So if you see on the left hand side of the screen, there is Lean, there is Kanban, there is Scrum, there is Extreme Programming, we have Crystal, Feature Driven Development, Dynamic System Development Methodology. Among all of these frameworks, Scrum is the most prominent framework that gets adopted in our IT industry. around 70 to 75% of the IT organizations are using pure Scrum. Another 10 to 15% are using hybrid Scrum. Like when I talk about hybrid Scrum, it is a combination of two agile frameworks. So to give you an example, we have many of the projects using both Scrum and Kanban, and hence we are calling it as hybrid agile. Um, and then we have 4 to 5% projects using Kanban framework, which is the next popular framework that our IT industry uses. And then we have extreme programming framework, which talks about only best practices. So there are a lot of best practices that are related with agile, and extreme programming is the framework that covers all of those best practices. Um, so this is some information about the frameworks. As you can see on the right hand side, it was actually proposed in the 70s, and it has, as I mentioned earlier in my PPT presentation, in my presentation, that it has been in existence since long time, but it is in the last 10 to 15 years that we have seen it gain prominence in the IT industry. And we saw the reason as to why Agile has suddenly exploded on the screen and why all the IT organizations are moving towards Agile. Um, so, and the second point is more about the iterative and incremental approach, and we'll see that soon in the upcoming slides. So that's about Agile methodology and the frameworks that are there related to Agile. Now, this is the iterative and incremental approach. What does it say? I, Agile says work in small batches and get feedback. Once you get feedback, add on to the stuff that you have already done, then get feedback. Once you get feedback, add on to the stuff that you have already done, and then get feedback till you actually finish the product. So if you see at every step, we are talking about getting a feedback. And who are we getting this feedback from? The client. So the project visibility is improving now. On a daily basis, the client can see how the project is progressing. On a daily basis, they can know how things are going. Are they going as per plan? Are they going on not per the plan? So, and it's not only the clients, even the team members who are working on this projects, they are approaching the clients on a daily basis. Hey, you know what? This is what I have done. Can you please verify and validate if everything looks fine? If it is good, then I'll go ahead. If it is not good, then I'll work on it till I achieve what I need to achieve. So what is happening? You're getting this constant feedback. So because of this, we are getting quality products. The defects are getting caught earlier, and it doesn't. And so the quality of the product is increasing. And when you're getting constant feedback, your knowledge is improving on a daily basis, and this is in turn leading to increase in productivity. When you are having less number of defects as you um, go frequency cycle by cycle, um, productivity keeps on increasing. This is all because of this constant feedback, and thus it Agile says we'll go with an iterative and incremental approach. We'll work in small batches. We'll take constant feedback and keep on improving the quality. This is how we are going to deliver a product or deliver a functionality. So this is the Agile mantra of working. So now moving on, these are the two things that I would really like to lay my emphasis on: Agile Manifesto and Agile Principles. This is the actual world of Agile. If you really adopt the Agile Manifesto and Agile Principles to at 100%, only then you can achieve 95% agility. So, and if you deviate from either of these points, is where things can go wrong. And this is what I emphasize in my sessions to my participants too. Hey, you know what? Agile is all about manifesto and principles. So let's talk about the Agile Manifesto and principles. In year 2001, people from 17 different process backgrounds gathered at a valley ranch in Arizona and said, you know what? The current methodology that we are using in our industry is failing us. We need to have a new methodology, and we should cater to our challenges and needs. And that is where the manifesto and principles were born that day. They came up with four value statements from Agile Manifesto perspective. The first one, individual and interaction over processes and tools. Agile is a big supporter of face-to-face communication or co-located model. So what is a co-located model? A co-located model is where the team, the scrum master, and the client, all of them are sitting at the same location in the same room. Agile is a big supporter of co-located model. Why? What does happen when you have people in a co-located model? You are in a position to do face-to-face communication. So Agile says, or the manifesto says, hey, if one person has any issue related to a programming or functionality, they can just walk up to the person who can give them that explanation, understand the explanation for that issue, come back to their desk, come back to their PC, and work on that issue and get moving along. So they say this is much more effective than you writing an email or chatting with somebody and then waiting for 2 to 3 days um, to receive the email reply, and then you would have to you would have certain process in place that you should first go to team lead, then the team lead should go to project manager, the project manager should go to client manager. That's all waste of time. Instead, just walk up to the person who you think can help you, ask that person, get the answer to the challenge that you're facing, come back to your PC and start working. Second, working product over comprehensive documentation. Agile is a big supporter of just enough. When we say just enough, they speak from a documentation perspective. Agile says, you know what? We don't want comprehensive documentation. We just need just enough documentation. But the just enough concept gives a rise to misconception in industry saying that if you are working in agile projects, you don't need any documentation. No, that is not the case. You need some documentation, but not detailed documentation. So in an actual agile project, you would not find TDDs and the BRDs and the BDDs and all of that stuff. You would actually have just one pager representing the work that the job that you're doing. If you are a developer, you would just mention it one page, the code or the unit test case, and what is the code about? What is the code trying to address? Why is this just enough documentation needed? It is needed because if let's say tomorrow the person is leaving the organization or is not available for particular amount of time and somebody wants to work on that piece of code, so somebody must understand what has been done for that particular code. Hence it says just enough documentation. It says don't waste too much time on documentation. We would rather focus our time on a working product or a working software. Anything that once delivers at the end of a 2 week cycle or a 3 week cycle or a 4 week cycle is a working software. So Agile says that let's focus on delivering a working software rather than wasting time in doing documentation. And particularly in my experience also, I have seen a lot of projects, a lot of organizations saying document everything that you have done. So if even if you have taken 2 days or 3 days to do a development and testing, it would take you 4 to 5 days just to do documentation. Just so I'll say that's waste of time. Let's focus that effort and energy into coming up with working product or working software. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So Agile says, say if you are in a position to help a customer with any issues that they are facing, don't always go to them and say, you know what, I can help you, but first sign this contract. Give me money, give me folks, give me this much time. Don't do that. It really puts off the clients or the customers. But instead, if you go and say, you know what, I can help you, give me some time, I'll come back to you. Let's have a discussion at that moment of time when I come back to you. And after some time, when you go to them with the solution and they're happy with it, they keep that in mind. They're very happy with what you have done for them. And tomorrow, if any big project or um, anything that is coming up, they will certainly keep this thing in mind and say, you know what, these guys helped me in time of my need without asking me for any money. These are the guys that I'm looking to work with. These are the guys I think can handle my project best, and automatically you would get that project or a contract. So it is very important to develop that trust with the customer instead of just asking them for money. And the fourth one, responding to change over following a plan. So that is the primary reason that Agile is getting adopted in the industry, because it is easier to adopt a change in Agile than that you do in other methodology, say waterfall. I'm not saying it cannot be done in waterfall, but it is a little complicated process. We see in waterfall, if a change comes in, it usually gets referred to the CCM board, and then they take a decision, they talk about it, and then they come to a decision saying, "Hey, you know what, we can do it for you, but we would need extra money, extra resources, more time." And that's where the clients were also getting frustrated. You know what, why should we always fork out money? Why should we always give more time and still not get our product or functionality in a good shape? So the concept of CCM doesn't come in Agile. There is a certain way um, that Agile um, responds to changes and accepts changes into the process, but certainly it doesn't say ask for money, ask for time, ask for resources. So it is easier to adopt change in Agile than in any other methodology. So while they concluded the manifesto, they put an important line at the end of it saying that while there is value in items on the right, we value the items on the left more. We are not dissing the items on the right completely, but we would rather go with the items on the left. And then they came up with 12 agile principles, and very simple, very easy to understand. Um, so early and continuous delivery of valuable software. So when you're working in small batches and delivering earlier, this is what it means. Welcoming changing requirements even late in development. We welcome changes. That's no issues. We we welcome changes with open arms, even though it is late in development. Delivering working software frequently. When you're working in 1 week cycle, 2 week cycle, 3 week cycle, 4 week cycle, you're delivering some amount of working software in frequently, in on a frequent basis. Business people and developers working together daily. This comes from the um, idea of the client and the team working together on a daily basis. Build people around motivated individuals and trust them to get the job done. So it says When you are hiring an agile team, ensure and let them know what they are getting into so that you're getting motivated individuals. And when you are in agile projects, keep on doing stuff that keeps on motivating the individuals. Now, the number one reason how you can motivate is an individual is by giving them the responsibility of delivering the product instead of standing on their head all the time and nagging them, where have you reached, how much time will it take, why are you not doing this, why are you not doing that. Just give them the work, say this is what I expect from you at the end of 2 weeks, and move away and let them do the work in their own manner. So, scientifically, it has been seen when individuals or people are given the responsibility or individual responsibility or told to own up a responsibility, they do it in a much better manner. Monetary satisfaction is momentarily. It can give happiness for some moment of time, but once again, if you get into the same rut, it doesn't help. But instead, giving challenges to an individual all the time and let them resolving those challenges, let them own up the decision, take those decisions. When you give those kind of responsibilities to an individual, that is where they react more positively, and that is where we see an increase in productivity. So that's what this fifth principle says. Sixth one, the most effective method of conveying information is face-to-face conversation. As we said, it's a big supporter of co-located model just because of the reason, hey, you know what, let's have face-to-face conversation. It gives a human touch to the team. People are constantly talking to each other. People are constantly knowing about each other. They know their strength, they know their weaknesses, and they are building that bond among each other. And that is where again, when you're knowing each other well, that's where the productivity also increases. Working software is the primary measure of progress. So how do you measure progress in Agile? It is through working software. Continuous attention to technical excellence. Let's adopt few best practices and ensure we are paying attention to the excellence. Simplicity. Keep things simple. Let's not make things overcomplicated. Let's not make things complex. So hence, when you're working on a particular requirement in Agile, you should focus just on that particular requirement. You're not going to focus from a perspective of what this requirement is going to affect. So if you get into that, that is where waste gets included in your code. Things that are not going to happen in future might get included in your code. So we say when you're working in an agile requirement, just focus on what that requirement is supposed to deliver, and that's how you keep your code lean, simple, and free of waste. Teams self-organize. Any issues, concerns that can be taken care of by the team gets taken care by the team. So you have to give them that responsibility, and you have to give them that decision making power, and that's where they are again happy team members. So one thing what you have to realize is when you give that responsibility of delivering uh, a product functionality and give them the decision making power of decision making, they are happy. Usually this is the question when I ask my participants when they come to my session, hey, are you guys happy? And it's only one or two people that I see genuinely smile. Otherwise, you can just guess from their face, hey, they are not happy. So if you have happy team members, it automatically relates to increase in productivity. Team regularly reflects and adjusts behavior. There are few meetings in Agile which actually force you to reflect on how things are going. See, if I leave process improvement upon an individual as a choice, I give you a guarantee that it would not be looked into. But when a meeting forces you to actually retrospect or introspect into the things that you have been doing, then you are forced to come up with points and understand where things are going bad, where things are going right, how can we improve, what can we do to maintain this continuous pace. So all of that gets addressed through a meeting. So these are the agile, this is what the agile manifesto and principles talk about. When you are into agile projects, this is what you need to ensure that you are following. You're following the manifesto, you're following the principles. If you follow them to the T, is when you achieve around 95% of agility in your projects. Not even 100%, only 95%. So if you deviate from any of this, of the value statements or the principles, is where you get into the virtual waterfall world again. So, and so why I'm emphasizing on this again is because scale agile that we are going to talk in upcoming slides also builds upon the principles that have been mentioned by agile, the same principles, and comes up with their own principle or a scaled version of the principle based on this principle. So it is a, I can say, a foundation stone, the principles and the manifesto for any agile projects. So let's pay more attention to Agile Manifesto and principles. Moving on, so benefits of Agile, high visibility, that the client is involved on a daily basis. The feedback is constant. So the visibility is more in Agile. Adaptability, it is easier to adapt into the processes that you have currently. It is not rigid. It can be adjusted as per the processes that are there in your current organization or in your current projects that you have. Business value, it keeps on increasing as you keep on delivering working software. The risk is at little high level when you start an agile project, but as you go by, as you go on, as you keep on understanding the functionality, as you get more comfortable with the functionality, is when the risk decreases. And with the constant feedback that we are getting, we have less number of defects coming up in the future. The productivity increases, the quality improves, and hence the risk keeps on decreasing. Other than these benefits, there are other reasons. As I mentioned, we have happy team members. We have a team which is taking the decisions, which is doing estimations on their own, which is resolving the issues within themselves, and hence they are very happy. No scope creep when you are actually working on a requirement. As I mentioned earlier, you should just focus on the requirement, not what it is going to affect. So there is no chance of scope creep. And usually I take this example in my session is Microsoft Word. 67% functionality of Microsoft Word till date doesn't get used by anybody. It's just waste code. And hence we have seen Microsoft is now the currently the biggest adopter of Agile and Scaled Agile. They've moved completely into Agile and Scaled Agile just because of this reason. ROI and TTM, these are the two mantras for the organizations to move to agile. Return on investment and time to market. With the continuous demand that is coming in from the customers for the organization, it is very important from a time to market perspective that they have the products out in the market as soon as possible so that they can retain their current clientele and add more clientele. If they are not with the current pace of the market, they would even lose the current clientele that they have. And secondly, as soon as you get into market, gives you an opportunity to start getting return on investment. You can rush into market with a smaller product, and then with the agile you can keep on adding to it using the iterative and incremental approach. But even with the smaller product that you have put into market is when you get an opportunity to earn an ROI, return on investment. And fourth, working in small batches. That is uh, that is where all of the above things can be achievable. We have happy team members because they're working in small batches, and then ROI and TTM can are actually achieved by working in small batches. So if you work in small batches, release something to market, start getting the ROI, and be on time with the time to market perspective. So these are some of the benefits of Agile that we see in the market currently. This is a Scrum SDLC, and this is how the Agile world looks like, and this is how things get executed in the Agile world. So it all starts with something called as product backlog. Product backlog is actually the list of the requirements or the features that the clients wants the team to work on within that particular release. This product backlog is actually defined for any release, and then work gets taken from the or the requirements get taken from the product backlog, and the team keeps on working on those requirements and finishes working on those requirements, all of those requirements within that particular release. So that is what the product backlog is all about. And this is something that the client has to prepare, and client has to keep it ready. Then we get into the first meeting, which is called as the sprint planning meeting. This is where the client, or let me call them as a product owner, an agile term, they will have a discussion with the team, and they will discuss, hey, you know what, these are the stuff that is there in the product backlog. These are the things that I want you to address in the first cycle, and they will explain all of the requirements to the team, right from the technical definition or from a functionality perspective, all of the things that the product owner has to uh, make the team understand. The team members, once they understand everything from a functionality perspective to the technical requirement, um, they will do an estimations, and they will come back to the product owner saying this is what we are going to do in the first cycle, and that's what they will start doing, and they'll start working on the in the cycle. So the work gets actually decided in the sprint planning meeting, and the output of a sprint planning meeting is a sprint backlog. Sprint backlog is nothing but the work that is supposed to be done for that particular sprint or that particular cycle. Once the sprint backlog is ready, the team starts working on the product, and then we have a daily meeting which happens on a daily basis, which is called as the daily scrum meeting, and it happens usually in the evening or in the morning, depending on the geographical location of the project. What we have to realize is all of these meetings are time bound, and they have to follow certain rituals. So first, uh, first of all, they are not called meetings in the agile world; they're called as ceremonies. Again, it comes from the fact that meetings all over the world failed to achieve the purpose for which they were called, and Agile wanted to move away from that. So, a ceremony, whether it is for a sad purpose or a good purpose, actually has some rituals associated with it, and is time bound, and hence Agile uses that terminology, ceremony, for the meetings. So, we have the sprint planning ceremony, which is 2 hours per 1 week of cycle or 1 week of sprint. So if you're going for a 2 weeks sprint, you would have maximum of 4 hours to complete your sprint planning in. Similarly, when it comes to daily scrum, it is 15 minutes per day, 15 minutes per day. Only the development team is supposed to speak. Product owner is optional, but as a suggestion, personal suggestion, product owner should be called on this call. This is the ceremony, this is the meeting through which the client has a daily visibility into project. How? Because what happens in this ceremony is you talk about three things only. What did I do today? What will I do tomorrow? Any impediments that I am facing? When you're talking only about these three questions, everybody gets a visibility as to how things are progressing in the project. And this call is on a daily basis. Hence, on a daily basis, everybody is getting insight into the progress of the project. Once the team is ready with the requirements or the user stories that we call them in the uh, agile world, say if we are working on a 2 week sprint, on the 10th day, they do something called as a sprint review or a sprint demo. This is where the user stories that have been worked on actually get demoed to the product owner, to the stakeholders, or anybody who's related to that project. So what we have to realize is it's not just about doing a demo, is the amount of visibility that the stakeholders get into the project as early as 2 weeks into a project. The stakeholders might not be involved on a daily basis. The product owner is certainly, but the stakeholders every 2 weeks they come to know how things are progressing in a project, which was not the case earlier. They used to wait for 10 to 12 months to just hear about how things are going and just do a UAT and all of that stuff. But and there was always a surprise for them. But here, as early as 1 week, as early as 2 weeks, depending on the project cycle, frequency cycle, the stakeholders are getting a visibility into the project as to what the team is doing, what has been done for that particular 2 weeks, what is going. So, so from a transparency and visibility perspective, Agile plays a huge role in addressing that challenge. And this is how it gets addressed through a sprint demo. And then after the sprint demo is done, we have another meeting called as a sprint retrospective meeting. The point that I was driving earlier, which talked about doing a process improvement. Here, the product owner, the scrum master, and the development team, they all get together and discuss. Hey, you know what? Let's discuss what went wrong, what went right. How do we actually keep on doing the good stuff that we are doing? How do we address the challenges? And all of that gets discussed in the retrospective meeting. We have primarily three roles in Agile. One is the product owner, the person who is usually the client or the person who knows the best about the product. Then we have the Scrum Master, who is there as a impediment remover, a servant leader, and who serves the team, helps the team achieve their goal. And then we have the development team. Though the name can be a little misguiding, it is not only developers within the development team, it's all the self-organizing team that we talked about. A person from like an architect, BA, developer, automation guy, tester guy, all of them forming a team. But what they are doing is they are actually to developing solutions for a product, for a functionality, and hence they are called as a development team. So we have primarily these three roles. Scrum Master is the person who facilitates all the ceremonies. Product Owner is the person who provides all the requirements. And Development Team is the team that works on all of these requirements. Now, if you see in the picture, there is a fifth yellow circle point which talks about product backlog refinement. This is the way changes get addressed into Agile. So, if there is any change coming in, you have a product backlog refinement meeting which usually happens on 7th or 8th day of a sprint, and not necessarily all team members have to be there. The scrum master can be there, can be talking to the product owner, and the product owner would say, you know what, a new change is coming in and we need to address it. And that is where you decide that we are going to address that change in the next sprint. We are not going to disturb the current cycle, current work that the team is doing. We are going to address the change in the next sprint. So this is very important. When we say we are going to address the change in the next sprint, we are not asking for money, we are not asking for time, we are not asking for resources. Only we are saying we are going to do it in the next sprint. Hence, I was mentioning it earlier, we have a certain way of addressing the change in agile, and it is easier to do than that of waterfall. This is how you would do it. You would have to call a product backlog refinement meeting, talk about the change, and take it up at the next sprint, depending on the business impact of that requirement. What we have to also understand from a requirement perspective when it is in the product backlog, they are all in a prioritized manner, and the prioritization is done as per the business impact that particular requirement has for the organization, and that's how the product backlog gets formed. So what we say is whatever you deliver at the end of a 1 week sprint, 2 week sprint, a 3 week sprint, or a 4 week sprint is of value, and hence agile is called as a value driven approach. Waterfall is usually called as a plan driven approach. You have to follow a certain plan and keep on doing that. You have certain phase gates, you have certain milestones, all of that is there. But here whatever you deliver has certain value, and hence it is called as a value driven approach. So this is basically a gist of a Scrum SDLC. That's how things work in the agile world. Just a quick representation of the same thing that we were talking. We have a big program backlog from which the product backlogs get created. They get distributed with to the teams, and then the team starts working on it. We have the ceremonies that they keep on working on, and then they keep on executing it, and this is how it looks, sprint by sprint, sprint by sprint, and then we get the actual products. So that was just a gist of agile and how things work in agile from a framework perspective, and what are the different roles, what are the cycles, what is the Scrum SDLC, and how why what are the benefits of agile, why are we going agile, why is it being adopted in a big manner. But as the industry adopted agile, along with it came certain challenges. Agile was a big success. I'm not saying it was not a big success, it was a big success. But what was happening is agile was getting adopted in the organization in small projects, in small teams. Few teams were doing it. Now, looking at the success of agile, everybody wanted to go the agile way. So now what was happening? We were having lots of teams who wanted to go agile. Therein came the challenges. Agile is basically meant for small teams. But when you have large teams who want to adopt agile, how do we go about it? Another disadvantage that we were seeing is though agile was being successful at a team level, we were still not getting the management buy-in for it. People were still skeptical to go all the way to agile. So how the the challenge used to come, how do we get those people also on board? How do we get the management on board with anybody, with us on the agile? Then there was a problem of cadence and synchronization. If one team was doing a 2 week sprint, another team was doing a 3 week sprint, how do we synchronize? How do we, if we have to do a system integration, how do we do integration? Because if I want to do integration at the end of 2 weeks, I couldn't do because the other team had a cadence of 3 weeks, or a 3 week cycle that they were working in. So all of those um, challenges started creeping in. So let me talk about few challenges here. Um, how do I coordinate between 5 to 10 agile teams? How do I drive my message from portfolio to team level? So from right from the top layer management to the team level, how do I drive those messages? How do I share common vision across multiple teams? If I implement agile across the organization, what are the roles that I would need? How do I replicate success of agile for the whole organization? How do I get cadence and synchronization in place? How do I do integration between several teams? So these are the challenges that the industry is currently facing. People who are doing agile, seeing the success of agile, everybody wants to go agile way. But when they start going agile way, these are the challenges they start facing. So the answer for all of that is Scaled Agile Framework for Enterprises, or SAFE. And the current model that it is using is 4.6. And that is where Scaled Agile has now gained prominence among the organization. If you are still doing Agile at a smaller level, please follow Agile. But if you want to scale it up or move it across organization or adopt it across organization in a big manner, Scaled Agile Framework is the way to go. So what's Scaled Agile Framework? Let's talk about it now. So just a little historical fact about it, data about it. It started in around year 2011 with 1.0 model and has evolved as we have uh, gone year by year. Usually every year they release a new model or a new version, and Scaled Agile takes a lot of best practices from the industry and they have come up with their model on their own. If you look at the bottom here, we see what is it is based on. It is based on agile development. It is taken best practices from lean product development, and it talks about system thinking. So currently the latest version that is out there is the SAFE 4.6 model. Um, just an interesting tidbit here. Um, in SAFE, if you see, um, everything else is in caps other than E. So I usually ask this question in my session: hey, why did they keep the E in small letters and not in caps? So the answer just is that it comes from actually the word safe, SAFE, and if you look it up in dictionary, it's like protected, don't worry, uh, uh, I'll protect you. So what it is trying to say is, hey, adopt our model, adopt our framework, and we guarantee you peace of mind. We are we have such a model that can address all your challenges, and you should feel safe while adopting this framework. And that's why they kept the term that E as a small e. So this is the big picture, or that's what it is called in the safe world. This is the complete model that is out there in the industry. Um, this is something called as a full safe. It consists of four layers: the team layer, the program layer, the large solution layer, and the portfolio layer. So before they came up with 4.6, they had another layer, which is another model, which was 4.5 model. 4.5 model is actually where they gave us an option of choosing layers. But before 4.45 model, when they came up with SAFE 4.0, if any organization had to adopt Scale Agile into their organization, they had to go with all of the four layers. And it was a big failure for Scale Agile framework. The organizations, though they wanted to go Scale Agile way, they were skeptical about going it because it was so complex to adopt. If you look at it, there are so many components within this big picture that if any organization had to go through it, it was difficult for them to achieve all of this. So organization completely shied away from the the full safe. So that's what they did after introducing safe 4.0, and in being in market for 7 to 8 months, they suddenly came up with 4.5 model, where they gave you an option of, sorry, uh, four tabs: essential safe, large solution safe, portfolio safe, and full safe. We'll go through that, but they essentially try to make it simpler for organizations to adopt safe. So why should you adopt safe? And this is something that has been taken from customer testimonial actually. This is what the customers have told and given feedback. It's 30 to 75% time to market, 25 to 75% defect reduction, improve in quality, increase in productivity, 10 to 50% happier, more motivated employees. And if you see, we have already discussed these points earlier when we are talking about agile. So the same thing continues here also. Same mantra is here also. Time to market, defect reduction, improve in quality, increase in productivity, and happier employees and motivated employees. So SAFe continues on with the same thing that Agile has proposed. As I said, the big picture can be confusing. So can somebody explain me? This is how they came up with. They said we'll now distribute it in four models. We have the complete model, and then we have four models. So one is the essential configuration, the portfolio configuration, the large solution configuration, and the full configuration. Essential configuration. This is basically the main or the simplest doorway or simplest entry point into the scale agile world. So what it says is, and if you look at it, this is the team level. This is where all the projects are currently residing. What it says is, if you have 5 to 10 teams working towards the same product, you know what? Let's combine them together and make one big team. It's just saying that. It's instead of having each team work individually, let's combine them and put them together and make one big team. This big team would be monitored by certain roles, and hence it would be easier to run that big team. Now, what is that big team? That is, big team is nothing but, and what they define it as, an agile release train, ART. So ART would have around 5 to 12 teams working on the train. You would have 50 to 125 people working on delivering a functionality or piece of product. So that's all essential safe is all about. So it becomes now easier to get into this scale agile world by first adopting essential safe. You already have those teams working. All it is saying is we will have all of these teams working together as one big team. This team will be monitored by these three roles: RT, release train engineer, a person who will look after the whole train; the product management, who will provide the features or the requirements to the product owners; and the architect, system architect, who would define the architecture, a common architecture. So from an architecture perspective, what you have to realize is, if you have different 5 to 12 teams working on an individual basis, all of these teams have their own architecture, and it becomes very complicated and very complex to maintain. So if you have one team who is working towards a single product, it is easier to have a common architecture for all the teams. And that is where the system architect team comes into picture. They will define a common architecture for the whole agile release train. The product management, when the teams increased, there were 4 to 5 product managers, and again things got confusing between them. How do we coordinate? How do we work? What are the things we need to do? And that's where we say, hey, all of these product owners will relate back to, or or talk back to the product management. Hey, how is things going on? How are things going? How do we coordinate? The main important thing is, if we put all of these teams together as one team, it is very important that they talk to each other, that they integrate. So it's, if we do not do that, it is going to be the same scenario even if we put them together. So the things that happen, and how it is done, I'll come to that in the upcoming slide, but it is just what is necessary to understand is, now if any organization has to get into scale agile, they can just go through or have an essential safe configuration in the place, and they can start working on the scale agile. All of the stuff that is there, it's a much complicated and much bigger discussion that needs to happen at a later stage, but this is just from a basic understanding is, if we look at essential safe, all of the things is there in place. You do not need to hire extra roles, you do not need to hire more people, you just need to combine the teams and have them work as one team, which is focused on delivering a single product, which is driven by a common architecture and a vision. That's all essential safe is all about. Then we have the large solution safe. Large solution safe comes into picture when we have two teams. Say if you have 500 members in a project, they cannot be put on a single team. One safe team can be only of 125 members. So you would have to form three teams in that scenario. When you have such kind of scenario, when you have more than one train, is when the large solution comes into picture, and all of these trains get driven by a value stream. A value stream is nothing that actually provides a solution. What is a solution? Solution is something that is achieved when you integrate the three trains. So just to give you an example, Microsoft Office. So Office is just not one product. It is actually an integration that is happening between Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and when all of these integrate together is when you actually get a Microsoft Office software. So if you were just working on a Microsoft Word, then the essential safe would have been enough. But now if you are working on a Word, on an Excel, on a PowerPoint, each of them is a train. And when you integrate all of these together is when you get a solution that is a Microsoft Office. So that's a large solution layer. Then we have the portfolio safe. This is where things are talking about um, funding. Um, so you would require constant funding to something that you are doing. Um, so if you have an ERP package, it's something that would require constant funding, and that's where the portfolio safe would come into picture. And if you have a SAP package, you can go for a large solution layer because it's a one big bang thing that you need to implement. But if you're going for a ERP package, ERP has a lot of stuff related to it, different components related to it, which would require constant um, financial commitment. That is where you would go for a portfolio layer. um, I know it's it's um, a little vague that I'm talking about, but it can only get clear once we get into safe in a proper manner. It becomes easier at that moment to explain. This explanation is just for you to understand as to where would you use a portfolio safe, or where you would use a large solution safe, or where would you use an essential safe. So essential safe is a basic entry into the scale agile world. Large solution would be where you have multiple trains running. Portfolio safe is where you would constantly require financial commitment, um, uh, and every time something has to be financed. And the full safe is something where, say, if you have SAP um, uh, SAP implementation, you have ERP implementation, you have CRM implementation. So you would have more than 3,000 to 5,000 people working on that, and that is where you would go full safe, and you would adopt the whole configuration or the whole framework to the fullest. So this is just a very, very, very high level introduction to the world of safe. So let me quickly talk about the 10 components for seamless scaled agile transformation. This is where we'll get into little more detail of what we have seen till now. So having a lean agile mindset and adhering to lean agile principles, it is very, very important. Again, it comes from the mindset perspective. Agile, the thing that we started agile with, it still continues into scale agile. We should have that lean agile mindset, that I am going to keep things simple. I am going to keep things lean. I am going to keep things free of waste, and that is where it actually helps. Then helps have self-organizing and self-managing cross-functional agile teams. We saw that already from an agile perspective also. Cadence and synchronization. This is what is something that came up in the discussion of challenges that we were facing from agile. PI planning, the heart of scale agile. We'll talk about it. DevOps and automation, something that is going on currently in our industry, the flavor of the season, the things that everybody wants to go right now. DevOps, adopt DevOps and automation. Why? We'll come to that point later. System demo, inspect and adapt session, innovative and planning iteration, architectural runway. Lean agile leaders will eventually drive safe. So if these are the 10 components that would help you do a seamless agile transformation. So let's talk about them. Lean agile mindset. This is where it comes from. So we have the foundation as the lean agile leadership, and all of us, the goal is to deliver value. And how can we deliver value? We should deliver value in the shortest sustainable lead time. So what are the things that we need to keep in, um, be aware of from an lean agile mindset? Respect for people and culture. It's the people who are going to do your work. So we should respect them. Culture, the culture of the organization, the geographical location of the project. All of that should be kept in mind when you are working with people. Flow. We should ensure there is continuous flow. There should not be a start stop thing in the project, and we should ensure flow. That is where the concept of Kanban comes into picture, which ensures that there is continuous flow. The pipeline should have things constantly moving through them, and they should not be clogged, they should not be stopped. So that is how we should ensure things are flowing smoothly through the pipeline. Innovation, always thinking how we can do better, how we can do more better, how we can get better, how we can distinguish of ourselves from other organizations, other companies. Relentless improvement. It's not about continuous improvement anymore. It is relentless improvement, day by day, minute by minute. How can we improve? How can we improve? A constant sense of danger should be there, that one should not rest on their laurels. That's what happened to Nokia. That's what happened to BlackBerry. They were happy with the things, that how things were going around, and they refused to change with times, and that's where they have completely disappeared. So you need to keep on constantly or relentlessly improving, and we see that happen with Apple. They keep on relentlessly improving. We'll do this, we'll do that. We come up with the airport, we'll come up with new earbuds, we'll come up with new products, and that is where they have been successful. So they are not worried about the sink cost, the cost that has already been they have occurred for the other products. If they feel something is going to be beneficial to the customer and the customers are going to adopt it, they are going for it, and hence the constant endeavor of relentless improvement and innovation. So this is how the lean agile mindset looks like, and these are the lean principles that safe adopts, and these are the scaled up version of the principles that we have seen from agile. We'll not be going through all of them, but this is just a gist of the principles that you need to follow as a lean agile leader. So when we talk about mindset, we are talking about this principle, adopting these principles. Build cross-functional agile teams. We have seen that. What we are seeing below is just the different silos that we used to have in the um, pre-agile world, and post-agile. We just combined those silos. We had people from different silos represent their silo and form an agile team. So that's what it also talks about. The basis of this remains the same. Agile teams power the train. The people who are going to work on the train, they are just the people who have been working in normal agile projects. And when you have people working in agile projects, you have three roles, the three primary roles: the product owner, the development team, and the scrum master. So the development team is the team who is going to work on the requirements. The product owner is the person who is going to provide those requirements. The scrum master is going to facilitate the meetings, help remove impediments, be a servant leader. So all of this remains the same even if you are working in a scaled agile environment, because the base of the scaled agile framework is a team layer, and that is where all the work gets done. All other stuff that happens in the upper layer is just from a integration perspective or delivering a solution, but the work actually gets done at the team layer. So that's what it is all about. So the agile teams power the train, that's what they say. Then cadence and synchronization. Scale agile says whatever we do, we'll do in a 2 weeks period or a 2 weeks sprint. So they are setting the cadence there. Then what we see is something called as PI planning, which I'll talk about it in just a minute. But the PI planning is defined for 8 to 10 weeks. So what again is being done by Scaled Agile? They're setting up a cadence there. So cadence is nothing but having a fixed frequency period of time. So if you're working in a sprint, it is going to be 2 weeks. Every team is going to be working in a 2 weeks frequency or a 2 week sprint, and thus you're setting up that cadence. So how it happens, what it helps with it, at any moment of time you have to do an integration, you can do it in a very simple manner, and hence synchronization becomes easier. So this is what the Scale Agile actually addresses, the issue of cadence and synchronization. Everybody is working in 2 week cycle. The PI is for 8 to 10 weeks, cannot go more than that, and synchronization can be done at any point, and as it is become as the teams are working in cadence. How does synchronization happens? Through continuous integration, through system demos. We'll talk about that in the upcoming slides. The PI planning, the heart of Scale Agile. The PI planning is something that is the scaled version of sprint planning, and it happens usually for 2 days. 2 days. So the first day, what happens is early in the morning. First of all, it also preaches co-location. So if you have 125 team members, all 125 team members are supposed to be at the same location. It starts with the CIO or the CXO addressing the whole gathering and talking about the vision. What is the vision? Why are we doing this PI? Its PI is program increment planning, which consists of 8 to 10 weeks. So they will talk about what are we trying to achieve within this 8 to 10 weeks. What is the vision for that particular PI, sorry. And then once they are done, the product management team comes in. They'll talk about the features that they would like to see addressed during that particular PI, and they'll explain all the features. Once they are done, the architect team comes. They talk from a technical perspective. What are the technical things that are we are just going to see in this particular PI? What are the programming languages that we are going to use? Is the database ready? Is infrastructure in place? All of that stuff. And only after that does the team go into a PI planning. The team starts discussing as to which features are they going to work in that particular PI, and in which sprint are they going to address. So they come up with a plan for 8 to 10 weeks. How are they going to do the work? And what happens is every team at the end of it, like we come up with a sprint backlog uh, after a sprint planning meeting. After a PI meeting, we come up with a PI objectives. What are we going to do in that particular PI? So for sprint 1, what are we going to do? For sprint 2, what we are going to do? Sprint 3, what we are going to do? Sprint 4, what we are going to do? But it is not that easy. It is not that simple. What when they are planning as to when they are going to do what in which iteration or in which sprint, they have to be constantly being talking to other teams also. What happens is a lot of these teams have dependencies within each other, so they have to be constantly talking to each team about the dependency. When are you going to address that? When is that dependency going to address? And based on that, the plan keeps on constantly changing. So at the end of day one, we just have a draft plan. Sorry about that. So we have just have a draft plan ready, and the draft plan is presented to the business owners or the project management team. This is what we are planning. Why does PI planning go for 2 days? We could have done it in one day. But what Scale Agile says is have a sleepover, have a good night's sleep, and come next day and re-look at the plan. And it has been found many a times that teams have missed something, teams want to remove something, and hence it says, hey, have a good sleepover, have a look at the plan. So next day when they come in, they have a look at the plan again, and they start talking about the plan again, and that is when the final draft is done. Only after show of hands is the plan approved, and then is after that the team gets into a regular sprint cycle and starts working on the features or the product backlog items. So that's what PI planning is all about. That's what happens in PI planning. We have actually a 2 hour um, demo of PI planning in the safe certification classes, which we do for the participants because they should be aware of how PI planning works. Um, PI planning is something that everybody is going to be involved in, because other stuff that are related to portfolio or related to financial, the team members might not be getting involved in all of that stuff. But PI planning is something where all of these layers that are there in the big picture that we saw, all of these layers get involved in the PI planning. So that's the amount of um, involvement that we have at an organization level in Scale Agile, and we see that from the beginning itself, where the CIO or the CXO comes to those PI planning meeting and is available to the teams the whole 2 days. It is not like they come and address the PI planning meeting for 1 hour and then go away. No, they are available to the team. So that's the amount of involvement that these people have. Now, DevOps and automation, it's something that all industries are going today. Why DevOps and automation? Um, Scale Agile talks about something called as release on demand. So it says we should have our system in such a manner that if the client feels we need to go release something into market immediately, the system should be ready to do that. And that's called as a release on demand concept. And um, the industry best average right now is around 24 hours. Amazon is the primary leader in it. They have the systems such in place that if they have to go uh, uh, into production, they can go every 11.6 seconds. That is how robust their system is. In 11.6 seconds, they can deploy something into the production environment. So that is where DevOps and automation is playing an important role, and that's what Scale Agile also preaches. The full system increment, this is from the system demo perspective. Um, every team would work in the 2 week cycle, 2 week sprint. So say we have 5 teams, they are doing the 2 week sprint. At the end of 2 week sprint, what happens is an integration happens between the 5 teams. The things that they have delivered gets integrated, and that is something called as a system demo. So that happens every 2 weeks, and this is something that is mandated by the Scale Agile framework, that we should have system demo in place. Whatever is done or whatever is completed by all those 5 teams should be integrated, and we should come up with a system demo, and we should show it to the product owners from a system demo perspective. Every 2 weeks it happens, and then we have a final system demo where all the system demos are integrated and a final system demo is done. So we'll come to that point later, but this should happen every 2 weeks as a best practice, and it should be in place. There is a separate systems team who takes care of doing this system demo. Then we have an inspect and adapt event, where, as I said, the final system demo happens. That is in the last week, last 2 weeks. So how it happens is we have four, if when we work to 8 to 10 weeks of sprint, we have 4 sprints which are dedicated for work, and we have one sprint which is dedicated only for innovation and planning. And in that innovation and planning, we have an inspect and adapt session. So what has happened in inspect and adapt session? First, a PI system demo. All the system demos that have been done for the first 4 weeks, they get uh, they get uh, um, integrated, and a final system demo is done for that particular PI. Then quantitative measurement is more about, have we met our goals? How are we progressing for our goals? So they look from that perspective. They look at the metrics that are get generated for that particular PI. And then problem solving workshop. What are the problems? So continuing, just sorry, took a water break. So these are the three things that happen in the inspect and adapt cycle. You see this I&A that is mentioned, which happens before the PI meeting starts. And then we have the innovation and planning iteration that I mentioned the last week, the 2 weeks that we get. It is where you are supposed to do only innovation and planning. You're supposed to do some coding dojos, you're supposed to do some hackathons, you're supposed to take up some sessions, you're supposed to do some certifications, anything that you can do to help your team and help the project progress in a proper manner. So these 2 weeks have to be used for that, um, in a proper fashion. So let me show you how does it usually look. So the first week you would really do all just focus on innovation and planning. The second week is when the innovation continues, and uh, on the second day you have the inspect and adapt workshop that we just talked about, and on the 10th and 11th day you had to have the next PI. You would have the next PI planning for the next PI. So, and then you would do the 12th, on the 12th day, you will have some more discussion. So, if you see, we have some um, pre-PI planning meeting and post PI planning meeting, which is mentioned in orange, it's all about if we have multiple trains running, how are we going to coordinate between the trains? What are the things that we need to do within the train? So that gets discussed in the pre-PI planning meeting. And after the PI planning meeting happens and everything happens for those um, for those discussion, um, what are the things that we need to probably address or readjust, and all of that gets discussed within the post PI planning. But it usually happens when we have multiple trains in going to work in a system. So that is where the pre PI planning and post PI planning happens. Usually if you have only one train, then not too much time gets taken up in the pre PI and a post PI. We just quickly discuss if we have some, say, dependency on a third party vendor, then how are we going to address that challenge? So we would do that in a, that address that challenge in a pre-PI planning meeting. Or if we have some vendor who is still in, who is going to be associated with us, but they are going to work in waterfall, and all other teams are going to work in agile. So how is it going to work? And that is what would we address in a pre-PI planning meeting. In a post PI planning meeting, after the PI planning is done, if still some adjustments needs to be done, you can do some adjustments and ensure everything is in its place before the teams actually get working on a sprint. And this is from an architectural runway perspective, which is called as an emerging design and an evolving architecture. Um, the architecture always gets defined for a PI or two PIs altogether, and it is not for the complete whole project, and it is complete, it is always evolving, and it is flexible to change, and the changes can get addressed all the time from an architecture, and hence it is called as an architectural runway. Things get actually take off from this runway. And again, this architecture is from a main purpose of, like, hey, let's have a common thing that drives all the team that are there on a train, and all of them share this common architecture, and everything comes from this architecture instead of having separate architectures. So this is just a very high level description of an architectural runway. And ultimately, it is the lean agile leadership who has to do all of that stuff, who has to learn, drive all of this. They have to think from core values. They have to think from a lean agile mindset. They have to keep safe principles in mind. They have to follow the implementation roadmap. So this is all what the lean agile leadership has to do. All of the 10 components that we have talked about, it's something that the lean agile leadership has to drive. So um, very important role again. And so um, when we talk about the implementation roadmap, how can we go about implementing this? This is the implementation roadmap. So this is how you can go about it at various ways, at various steps. You can see things that will be helpful for you to implementing safe in this journey. Where should you do the certification? When should you do the certification? What are the things that you should do along the roadmap? This gives you an information, very high level information on it. And these are the few certifications that are out there in the market right now. I believe it is 12, uh, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Around 11 to 12 certifications out there in the market that you can do, SPC being the highest, and all other certifications for different roles, RTE, for teams, for safe agilist role, for DevOps, for government, lot of, and then agile software engineering. So a lot of certification out there that one can take from a scale agile perspective. um, Always recommended to undergo a certification if you are going to work on a scale agile project. So this is something that will help one determine what certifications one can take. So that's all I had, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you for being with me on this journey. I hope I have been able to explain you on a very high level as to how agile and scale agile work. So thank you again for listening to me, and have a great day.